It's time for Carving Up the Context. Right now, here we go, as Deion Sanders says, give me my theme music. Okay, so Tom Brady, on this week's edition of Carving Up the Context, Tom Brady was talking last week to Stephen A. Smith, reiterated his comments recently this week on his own podcast, the Let's Go podcast, which he does with the legend, Jim Gray. It's a fantastic show. They had Denzel Washington on recently, and Tom and Denzel were reciting a scene from Remember the Titans. It was really, really cool. Two of the greatest ever, Tom and Denzel. But he was talking to Stephen A. last week on Stephen A.'s podcast about a level of mediocrity he's seen in the NFL and the factors that he thinks are playing into that. Take a listen.
I think there's a lot of mediocrity in today's NFL. Yeah. I don't see the excellence that I saw in the past.
Why not?
And
why not?
I think the coaching isn't as good as it was. I don't think the development of young players is as good as it was. The rules have allowed a lot of bad habits to get into the actual performance of the game. Mm-hmm. So I just think the product, in my opinion, is less than what it's been. I look at a lot of players like Ray Lewis and Rodney Harrison and Ronnie Lott and guys that impacted the game in a certain way, and every hit they would have made would have been a penalty. You hear coaches complaining about their own player being tackled and not necessarily, why don't they talk to their player about how to protect himself? We used to work on the fundamentals of those things all the time. Now they're trying to be regulated all the time. Offensive players need to protect themselves. It's not up to the defensive player to protect the offensive player. A defensive player needs to protect himself. I didn't throw the ball to certain areas because I was afraid players were going to get knocked out. That's the reality. Wow. I didn't throw it to the middle when I played Ray Lewis because you knock him out of the game, and I couldn't afford to lose a good player.
Okay, so Tom, you heard what he said on the Stephen A. Smith podcast last week. Here's what he said on his own podcast. We don't have the soundbite, so I'll read it off. It was on the Let's Go podcast in the last couple of days. He said, quote, "The pro game is reflecting what the college game is as opposed to the college game reflecting what the pro game is. We're asking pro players to play college football. That's the biggest difference I see. It's way more checkers than it is chess. I tried to play chess. I wanted to have 3 moves ahead of you at all times." Tom Brady is not in any way, usually when I do Carving Up the Context, I'm like, okay, this person is wrong, and here's why. Tom is not wrong in some of his assessments. I'll get to the rules aspect of it in a second, but I'll start with the quarterbacks aspect because that's what he was talking about. Because listen, Tom's a quarterback. Tom's the greatest quarterback. He's the standard of what every quarterback wants to be and is. He's not wrong, but he is a bit incomplete, and here's why. Tom was talking about in this recent quote that I just read, and sort of was touching on this in that soundbite you just heard, about how the game's more chess, or needs to be more chess than it is checkers. It needs to be more complicated, and I want to be a step ahead of you from a schematic standpoint than you are ahead of me to a certain degree. He used to talk about all these battles. He talked about it there with Ray Lewis and all these great defensive players, and like the back and forth, the chess match. But what Tom Brady is missing is this. When Tom Brady became a quote-unquote great chess player, so to speak, as a quarterback, great guy breaking down defenses, being great at the line of scrimmage, being 1 step or 3 steps ahead, as he said in that recent quote, of the defense he's playing to gain an advantage, he didn't come into the league like that, because really, no quarterback comes in the league like that. It's with any job. You come in, you have no experience at doing what you have been employed to do. In some respects, obviously that's not the case with others, but in terms of college and NFL, very different. Not as different as it used to be, as Tom talked about the college game, but I'm going to give you an example. 2012. Let's go back to 2012, which it's crazy that it's been 11 years, almost 12 now, but let's go back to the 2012 NFL season, start of that year, okay? Tom, by this point, this would be year 13 of his career. He had mastered the game. He had mastered the position. He understood what it took to gain an advantage from a schematic standpoint, from an ability standpoint. We know whatever the case may be, Tom had that. He talks about the mediocrity in today's NFL and the simplicity of today's NFL in terms of the quarterback position. Part of the reason it wasn't that way, again, I'm using 2012 for an example, is because you know what every great quarterback at that time, outside of one, had in common? They were all in their 30s. Tom Brady was 35. Peyton Manning was 36. Drew Brees was 33. Even the guys we don't think were awesome quarterbacks, they were very effective. Eli Manning was 31. Tony Romo, 32. Phillip Rivers, 31. Big Ben, 30. The spring chicken, Aaron Rodgers, was 28. The great quarterbacks were either maybe a little past their prime, right smack dab in the middle of their prime, or about to go into their prime. The great quarterbacks, part of the reason what made them great is they did have a schematic advantage to a certain extent. They had mastered the position. The reason that's not the case nowadays, they might as well be kids. Patrick Mahomes is 28 years old. Josh Allen, 27. Burrow and Lamar are both 26. Hurts is 25. Also, so is Tua. Justin Herbert is 24, 25 years old. Trevor Lawrence, 24. CJ Stroud, 22 years old. He was born in the 21st century. Dak's the old guy. He's 30. All of the great quarterbacks, at least most of the great quarterbacks, really haven't mastered the position yet because they haven't played long enough. Mahomes was drafted in 2017. Allen Lamar drafted 2018. Lamar was a young draft pick. Joe Burrow was only drafted 3 years ago. Trevor Lawrence 2 years ago. CJ Stroud this year. It takes time. It takes reps. It takes a lot of games. For Tom Brady, it took almost a decade for him to truly evolve into, okay, that guy's awesome. When was Tom's first year we were like, that might be the best quarterback in the league? It was 2007. Remember the Randy Moss year, 50 touchdowns, 18-1. Patriots almost completed a perfect season, the first ever 19-0 season in the history of the league. It took Tom almost a decade to get to that point. Tom didn't just come in. Matter of fact, a lot of the knock on Tom, some of it I think is unjustified, but a lot of the knock on Tom was, man, when he came in, he was a game manager. That's why a lot of folks, in my view, wrongly gave the bulk of the credit to Belichick. They had these great defenses, and Tom was just, don't screw it up, Tom Brady, And that sort of was the case with that first Super Bowl against the greatest show on turf. Beyond that, it wasn't, but you see where people got that from. Tom was not playing chess when he came into the NFL. The second thing where I think Tom is not wrong on, but a bit incomplete on, is when he's talking about the rule changes. Where he's talking about, hey, guys can't go over the middle. You can't hit guys a certain way. Some of the hits that he mentioned, guys like Ronnie Lott, and I think he might have mentioned Ed Reed, some of the great defensive players, Ray Lewis, some of the hits they made back in the day would have been penalties today, would have been flags today. That's true. But I'll piggyback on a point that my man Barry Grant Jr., because I want to give props where it's due, because he's the first person I heard say this. Shout out to Barry, All Even Podcast here at The Grid. He said this, and I agree with him. Tom Brady's part of the reason those rules changed. Tom's stature, Tom's greatness, because I mentioned the 2007 season where he was incredible, where he really matured and evolved into a great quarterback. Opening day, the very next season, at Arrowhead Stadium against the Kansas City Chiefs. Early in the game, guy comes around, hits Tom Brady low, tears his ACL, done for the season. The rules changed that offseason. You can't hit quarterbacks low. Aaron Rodgers, I want to piggyback on this. Aaron Rodgers was on the Pat McAfee show yesterday. He's on there every Tuesday. And Aaron said, hey, I agree with Tom Brady about how the rules maybe have made the game a little bit soft to a certain extent. Okay, but Aaron Rodgers is also, because of his stature and his greatness, is a big reason that the rules changed in terms of protecting quarterbacks. Remember 2017? I think this was week 6 of 2017. The Packers are on the road against the Minnesota Vikings. And the linebacker for the Vikings, Anthony Barr, comes around, not only hits Aaron Rodgers, but drives him into the ground. We'd seen this. This was a legal hit just within the last decade. Hits Aaron Rodgers, drives him into the ground, puts his full body weight on him, drives Aaron Rodgers into the U.S. Bank Stadium turf. And Aaron Rodgers, I think, broke his collarbone and missed a huge chunk of the season. They changed the rule the next year. You can't put your full body weight in the quarterback. And I remember to start that 2018 season, guys like Clay Matthews were getting penalized and other pass rushers. And Aaron Donald, because he's the freak of nature that he is, Aaron Donald's like, okay, I won't put my body weight on him. I'll literally just grab the quarterback and throw him to the ground. Literally, check Aaron Donald's tape from 2018. He's got a lot of sacks that look like that. Brady and Rodgers, Brady in particular, aren't wrong, but they are incomplete in the sense that they're part of the reason the rule changed, and they benefited from the rules changing. Now, I'm not knocking them for that because we got to see Tom Brady evolve into having the greatest prime, the longest prime of any athlete we've ever seen, with the exception of LeBron James. Aaron Rodgers' prime has extended a very long time. Just 2 years ago, he's the MVP of the league. In the 80s and 90s, would that have been the case? They would have still been great. They would have still been on-timers. Heck, Tom might have even still been the GOAT. They wouldn't have played this long. For the record, I'm glad the rules have changed. I'm glad we got to see Tom play as long as he has. I'm glad we've got to see Aaron do what he has to this point in his career pre-Achilles tear. But those don't happen. The rules that they're complaining about don't change without them. So when it comes to Tom evaluating quarterback play and how the game is maybe a little bit more simplistic, well, yeah, it should be. These guys are kind of kids. Again, the oldest, we can argue all day about whether or not he's elite, whatever. The oldest, very effective quarterback in the NFL, and certainly he's in the MVP discussion this year, Dak Prescott, literally just turned 30 a few months ago. So Dak's like the old guy. He's the elder statesman. But really the only guys in their 30s that are playing the quarterback at a decent to a pretty high level are Stafford and Russell Wilson. And Stafford's breaking down physically. Russell's not the Russell of years past. 11 years ago, 2012, all the great quarterbacks outside of Aaron Rodgers were in their 30s. So give it 5 years, 7 years or so, when Mahomes and Herbert and Allen, I don't know if Allen's body's going to hold up. I hope he does. But Josh Allen and Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, when those guys get in their 30s, it is going to be chess. They are going to be 5 steps ahead of the defense. And it is going to look a little bit like what we saw with Brady's era of great quarterbacks. But I think in some sense, we are being a little too quick to judge guys who come in the league. By the way, maybe I don't think this is true, but maybe part of the reason Tom and others have talked about, man, the quality of quarterback play, I think it's because the guys today, some of this is the rule changes, some of it is coaching, and some of this is just pure raw ability and talent. I think because the quarterback play is of the upper tier guys, the guys we all recognize as some of the best in the league, is so great, it makes the mid guys or the terrible guys look even worse. Kenny Pickett, that's my guy in Pittsburgh. I shouldn't say I love Kenny Pickett. I really like Kenny Pickett. There's some qualities about him that I think can potentially be a franchise quarterback. Not a star, but a franchise quarterback. Kirk Cousins level at his absolute peak potentially. Kenny Pickett 30 years ago, you could win a Super Bowl with him. You probably can't nowadays. That's changed as well. And Zach Wilson, and Mac Jones, who are really bad, they look even worse with some of the great quarterbacks we see nowadays, with the size, the arm strength, the accuracy, the mobility, heck, the leadership that we see from some of the guys today. So Tom Brady is far from wrong. He's just incomplete in terms of the rule changes and in terms of the quarterback play in the NFL. So as far as this week's edition of Carving Up the Context, that's the context that I think Tom was missing. I'm certainly, who am I? Some podcaster in Tennessee to question the greatness and the football acumen of the greatest player that's ever played in the league. I just don't think he was complete in his assessment. That's my only criticism. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.